Well, thanks for that introduction, Liam. So the next part of the meeting is the discussion. So I'll open it up for people to make points or ask questions. So I know a lot of people aren't on camera, but if they want to come in, people who are on camera can indicate with their hand, and also people who are off camera can use the hand raise icon on Zoom. So at this point, I'll just open it up.
I think, Jonathan, between the two of us, we've covered absolutely everything to everybody's satisfaction.
I doubt that. Yep, Chris.
Okay. Hello, Liam. It was a pretty comprehensive report. Thanks very much. I've one question. You mentioned pretty early on that the Lexit supporters were afraid to hold their rallies in the street because of some underlying fear that the far right would join them, you know. But what I was wondering, is there any evidence there that there's any groundswell among those organisations for a change of mind on the positions that they took that were pro-Brexit? Have you noticed anything?
No, is the short answer.
So anyone else, just a question or a point? So as I said before, people on camera can just raise their hand, but people who are off camera can use the raise hand icon on Zoom.
Sorry. Question. Sorry, I missed the meeting really because I was at something else. I'm just curious, do people still feel sorry for Corbyn? There is that general sort of thing, oh, poor Jeremy, they all got at him. No.
Well, I can answer that now if you wish. Right. I mean, I think the amount of personal and political abuse that the man received was absolutely crushing. And in some of their unguarded moments, the right said, we just don't want to destroy this man politically. We want to destroy him personally. I think they were hoping that by keeping up year after year of pressure, mostly lies, that they could break him personally. I think it's fair to say that there still remains a huge amount of affection for him among the people who supported him. But politically, he's not doing anything terribly interesting. You know, he's a football fan, so apparently he was talking about the football stuff yesterday, which means I would automatically switch off as a question of principle. He did launch this peace and justice thingy just before Christmas, which seemed to have a strong influence from a few Church of England vicars, because it was in favour of every nice thing, but not terribly political. Yeah, so sympathy, no. I would say affection, yes, in the sense that, you know, an insult to him was an insult to the whole movement.
Yeah, John. Yeah, need to unmute. Need to unmute, John.
I thought it was you censoring me, Jonathan. I didn't know I was allowed to speak. So I'm going to be critical of Liam. I'm quite happy with what he said, but I thought it was far too descriptive. What's driving this? And what seems to be driving it is a crisis of capitalism in Britain. So what's the nature of that crisis? The nature of that crisis, and this is maybe far and very wide, is the continuous inability of British capital to increase productivity. And what I remember of this is that Blair made a big attempt to force lazy English youth out of their kips and into jobs, and essentially failed in that, and give up on it because you had this influx of European workers who would do the work instead. But in fact, the problems of British productivity aren't really directly connected to the laziness of the workforce or anything like that. So things didn't really improve. And there's two things behind Brexit that are sort of very evident. One is a very, very growing public racism, and that's been on the boil for quite a long time. And I was over on the day after the Brexit vote, and there was when I was walking down the street in London, there was this Indian woman and her child hiding in a bookshop, and this little bollocks sort of openly threatened him with the very familiar picture from the north of Ireland, the cop saying, "Now, boys, now, don't be upsetting anybody." And the other thing is the constant scream of regulation. If we get rid of regulation, we can really turn a profit. And those two things have to play out. Right? We don't know how those. Liam mentioned it. We don't know how they're going to play out. How is the absence of migrant labour going to affect the British economy? You wouldn't have to be a genius to say it'll affect it negatively, And as I understand it at the moment, the British economy fell by 10%, and they're able to cover that a bit by COVID, but a lot of it seems to be browned up with Brexit. So, what do we expect now? We expect continued and increased racism, and we also an attempt to win over this deregulation impulse, which essentially would be a full-scale attack on the working class. What do you deregulate? You deregulate wages, you deregulate working conditions, you deregulate holidays, you deregulate health cover, you deregulate agriculture produce. That's what you deregulate. And the other thing that has to work out there is the British have actually settled for a halfway house. They've settled for a soft Brexit. And out of that soft Brexit comes the difficulties of managing events in Ireland and so on. And also there's a difficulty about actually making deals around the world, setting up Singapore on Thames, that would continue, that would continue. They're still blocked in that, and the further they advance along that road, the more likely it is that the EU and they will will separate. You know, the soft Brexit deal holds them by certain chains. If they break those chains, they're in the hard Brexit. The Europeans show no interest in letting them off. You know, letting them have their cake and eat it, which was what Boris always claimed he could do. So there's this continuing crisis there. So two questions. Number one, how far can you push racism? And that's, I think, my own opinion is, what else can you do with it? It's a sort of full-blown racism. You've got it at the minute. It hasn't translated into race riots or pogroms, but it's pretty immersive. And secondly, how are the British capitalists going to resolve this question of deregulation? And sort of just to add on, a slight complication is they seem to think that the City of London would be immune and would be a big bargaining chip. And it seems it's actually not worked out that way. Things are working out quite badly in terms of the City of London. And the last question I would say or ask is, what level of collapse, of economic collapse, would start to shift working class opinion? I actually don't believe that the mass of the working class are sort of supporting, the full Brexit nonsense, but they're not opposing it either. They think it's over with, that we've done Brexit, we're into something else. And the answer to that seems to be that to get any sort of backlash, you would need a political leadership. And I'm not quite sure where that's going to come from. That, I suppose, leads us on to the crisis of the left, because there's no coherent British socialist movement that understands that it's both anti-Brexit and anti-European capital, and is trying to advance a unity of European workers around socialism.
Right. So anybody else want to come in? So there's not many people on camera. So if people who are off camera want to come in, just use the raise hand icon. Yeah, Chris, again.
Just on that thing about the City of London, I read something a few days ago about the fact that they have lost around about 33% of their income, and it's moved in terms of absolute numbers of firms that have moved. Dublin comes out tops. After that is Paris, and then Amsterdam, which has got the majority of the business. But I can't remember where I read it, maybe the Financial Times or something like that, when they were predicting that Frankfurt would be the predominant centre for stocks and share trading in Europe. But if the British, because it hasn't worked out so good for them, if they decide that they want to go for a full hard Brexit, would that exacerbate that? I mean, what they were basing their strategy on was that they would maintain the City of London because it was the main income for the country. So if they're already losing it and they gamble on a fully hard Brexit, it seems like a gamble to me, but I'm not sure about that. Does anybody have any further information on that topic?
Well, do you want me to respond to that, Jonathan?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Okay. Right. What struck me as Chris was speaking there was that one of the things that's really played well for Johnson is the uselessness of the European Union's vaccination programme, because he's able to point to that and say it was Brexit and us being allowed to go our own way and do this stuff by ourselves, which means that we're not in the same position as France, Germany, Italy in terms of the vaccination program. And I think that's put a lot of credit in the bank for him. And that's, I think, going to be something of an ideological support for Brexit, for the next 18 months, 2 years or thereabouts. On John's question, how far can you push racism? I think that rather depends where you are. You see, it always strikes me when I travel outside London and the big English cities that most of England is very, very different. Very, very different. So last week I was down towards the Isle of Wight, and it's a very apt name. Right, the population around there is something like 97% white, and all that ideological stuff of Churchill, the Second World War, is much more prevalent than it is here. So at the minute, I don't think in the big English cities, in the Birminghams, the Manchesters, the Londons, the Bristols, a mass racist movement would be allowed to develop. I think spontaneous as they were, the Black Lives Matter protests showed that people are willing to take to the streets, overwhelmingly black, but with most young white people are a great deal less racist than their parents and definitely their grandparents. The racist Brexit cohort tends to be people on the wrong side of 45, and there are all these charts about the older people are, the more likely they are to be racist, the more likely they are to be Brexiteers. But as an ideological cudgel, that racism, I think, is incredibly useful. And Patel is absolutely vile on this. And through my work recently, I've seen the conditions asylum seekers are forced to live on, and honestly, I wouldn't allow my cats to live in those conditions. But this is very deliberate. So I think the racism thing will be used, but there will come a point where British capital is going to say, Jesus, well, these vegetables are going to be rotten in the fields unless we can get these Bavarians back. But it's true. The reason that British capital needs all the cheap labour is, very significant underinvestment in technology, and it's large sections of the British economy are quite primitive from that point of view. The point about the City of London is well made, and I should have done a bit more homework on that and got the figures, but it's true. The Frankfurt and the Amsterdam and the Dublin stock exchanges are hoovering up large amounts of the business that used to go through the City of London. And given the centrality of the city in England's economy, and particularly in the most prosperous part, the South East's economy, that potentially is going to be quite devastating in the long term, which presumably then will increase that tendency to argue for deregulation. How bad will it have to be to shift working class opinion? I mean, I think it'll have to be pretty bad. I mean, there are two countervailing pressures, I think. One is, right, the Brexiteers are dying off rather more quickly than the anti-Brexiteers. But the ideological significance of English nationalism, I think, means that you're looking at least a decade before any serious movement in the British state is possible to undo Brexit. I think that's that.
Yep, thanks. So anyone else want to come in, make a point or ask a question?
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, they're not really very incisive, but however, the payment which the working class will have to do shoulder for the COVID crisis, do you think that that will have any impact? Or is the fact that Corbyn and what passes as the left, you know, the socialist left, are all pro-Brexit? That where would the leadership of opposition come from in terms of any fight back against the austerity that would be imposed on people to pay for the COVID crisis?
There has been no meaningful fight back against austerity since the Tories and the Liberal Democrats introduced it. What you've had have been, quite localized defensive struggles. Some of which win, many of which lose either totally or partially. And there's, I think, more a sense of resignation about all this than any any desire to resist outside very, very small vanguard layers. And that's partly because the political leadership just isn't there. For whatever his strengths and weaknesses, at least Corbyn gave people a sense of political confidence that organisation was possible. But given the precarious nature of lots of people's lives at the minute, I think they're just glad to have something, and which is one of the things that's making it easier for the capitalists to get away with these attacks. That sense of despair almost, or passivity, for want of a better word.
Dave, you indicated.
Yeah, just a short point. I think things would seem more hopeful if there was a left alternative, a coherent one. There's obviously a lot of support for the left, just as much as there has been, in previous decades, really. I mean, I don't think that's gone away. Corbyn won didn't win, but he got a huge vote in 2017. That was a sign, and the Brexit, what Brexit? Well, that was a campaign by the right of the Tory party, which had been going on for probably 30, 40 years, and it was successful. And we're living through that now, and that isn't going to go away for a while, because they really, they won. They won that battle, and that's quite something for a left that doesn't have a very partly one of the reasons the left sort of was hit so badly by that was because they had such a poor position. I mean, Corbyn's position was one of the things that brought him down. It's not inevitable. I mean, this support, this sort of hardline support that maybe is evident for Johnson in the polls, or I don't know if it's hardline, but anyway, it's what that's a result of really recent history. But yeah, the left really needs to without a coherent sort of organization, and it could be based on small parties, small groups, such as socialist resistance in England and Trotskyist groups, but it needs to be based on those groups as well need to have a coherent position about what the problem is and how we can build, you know, because I think the left, even the revolutionary left, is very divided. A lot of them have, for example, in Ireland, fallen into support for, you know, well, if we get some MPs and, you know, if we maybe make an alliance with Sinn Féin, you know, they sort of, you know, putting your faith in, that's a sign of sort of desperation. And you don't need that desperation, because what we say is that, you know, these problems are the problems in society are real and will always, you know, people will always fight back, you know, and people will, you know, it will always be there. But if the left needs to be so, you know, have a coherent alternative, it's a very very serious problem, you know, but it's also quite simple in a way, because I think it's one of the major sticking points, you know.
Right. Joe, you indicated as well.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. I don't think there's any big mystery about why the left is in a bad position. I think the explanation's very simple, and the reason is that they've been wrong. And if you get things wrong, you pay the price for being wrong. So I suppose if I was to ask Liam some questions, the three questions I would ask is, you know, why is there not now a campaign in the left, even a small-scale campaign against Brexit? Because what is quite clear is that Brexit will have a catastrophic effect on the British economy, that you can't have that effect without affecting the working class, that there has to be a campaign to explain why this has happened. You know, tonight we've heard people say that this has been a soft Brexit. When it hasn't been a soft Brexit, there wasn't a soft Brexit on offer. We've seen massive declines in economic activity that will lead to job closures, to jobs moving to other countries. And that's not something that people are going to not to notice. So, you know, if the left is still talking as if Brexit has been decided, as the majority of people in Britain seem to wish that it has, then what they should really be saying is that, you know, Brexit has hardly started. And when the ball gets rolling, then they will see the effects. And the left should be at the forefront of explaining the effects of Brexit, and why it should still be opposed, and shouldn't be accepting that it's a fait accompli, that there is no reversing of it. So that's one question to Liam. You know, why is there no campaign against Brexit when it was such a cause célèbre for some of the left anyway, in opposition to it before the referendum? The second question I think is, where has the zero COVID campaign gone? Does the left still fight for a zero COVID policy by the government? You know, Liam has explained that a lot of people are recovering from the pandemic and they're just glad to have come through it. But the left itself has been the most hysterical in denouncing the effects of the pandemic. And if people were scared, the left certainly did nothing to try to give them courage. In fact, from what I've seen on Facebook, and obviously I haven't been in Britain with lockdown.
Lost your audio.
So it can't be any surprise to the left if people are scared, and if they're scared, they aren't prepared to take part in political activity. So the question there to Liam is, you know, has the left reevaluated what's happened over COVID? Have they decided to drop the zero COVID policy because they maybe realise now that it's not going to run? But what is their policy? The third thing that I wanted to ask was, Liam talked about the growth of independence movements in Scotland and Wales. The question I want to ask is, why does the left support these nationalist movements? You know, was it not obvious when Corbyn was around that Scottish nationalism was taking votes away from the Labour Party in Scotland? Did they fail to notice that made Corbyn's job an awful lot difficult in terms of winning a Labour majority? have they failed to notice that the nationalism of Boris Johnson is simply an English version of the nationalism of the SNP? Or have they bought into this some ridiculous idea that Scottish nationalism is progressive? I think in the last week I've seen some online Facebook advertisement for the new Alba party of Alex Salmond, which talks about how Scottish freedom and nationalism is taking inspiration on a medieval king that is fancy. So that's the three questions.
So your audio is breaking up. Something shocking.
Opposing Brexit now. Why is the left? No, is the left still supporting zero COVID? And thirdly, why is the left supporting these nationalist movements in Britain?
Okay. I think, Jonathan, unless anybody else
I'll just
come in, that would be.
Yeah, you may want to leave that to the summary. So
yeah,
I'm going to draw the discussion part of the meeting to a close now. But I'll allow people to come in one last time. So anyone who wants to indicate, John, you need your audio. Yeah.
Let me be quite clear. That was an action by by Jonathan, who muted me. I've never muted myself. But anyway, see, the thing is that the question really is about how do you go about, how do you have a left, I mean, the left forces in Britain are minuscule, nearly as bad as Ireland, and, badly fragmented. So what's the starting point, And I think the starting point is to say what you see. And by say what you see, I don't mean say what you see in terms of this is what's happening, but say what you see and what are the class forces in action here. And if you were to do that, you can describe a capitalist crisis in Europe. There's clearly a capitalist crisis in Europe. Europe is not some shining city on the hill. So that's a bit of a weakness in trying to argue against Brexit, is that a lot of the reactionary elements of inside Britain are also in Europe itself, and to a large extent the European leadership capitulate to the rights, simply drawing the line at when you leave. Everything else they seem happy with. There's work to be done. I think if you could say what was happening in terms of class forces, then you could begin to construct a program that people could organize around. I think the problem is that the left is so far down, and partly because of the low level of class struggle, that you're down to the dregs. I mean, you've got people who describe themselves as leftists, and really what they are is they're a sort of social group around the trade unions. And they don't have any deep critique of capitalism. They up the workers or something like that and have a pint down the local. And you have other left groups who, I'll not name any of them, who concentrate on siphoning up students, and whatever the students think is the going thing, they define as the left milieu. So there's just there's really no way around some level of rigor about what's class society. I mean, Karl Marx didn't have a bloody movement, when he had it sometimes, but essentially he eventually had to sit down in a library and say, what the F's going on here, so.
All right, so got a couple more indications. MP, you got your hand up? No. Yeah. No, I'm not getting any audio.
Get this audio to work.
You're working.
Yeah, we've got it now.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
All right, sorry about that. No, just a quick point, just what Liam mentioned about Boris Johnson sort of getting the shot of the arm because of the vaccine rollout, and what John mentioned about the milieu, about the unions here, the fact that the use of military personnel to administer the vaccines here was a big precedent that was set there, and there was sort of not much said. Unison kind of briefly opposed it. There was 100 medics, combat medics needed to be shipped over to administer vaccines. And just the dangerous precedent I thought was set by that. But also in terms of other campaigns against deindustrialisation in Belfast, you had, was it NIPSA or no, sorry, Unite, were calling for Royal Navy frigates to be built in Harland and Wolff around the time of that closure. And also what was Shorts Bombardier is now going to, I think it's an American company, is going to be doing these unmanned drones development there. So there's just this real militarization effort going on. And maybe just to say, like, in terms of the US administration now and the orientation towards a new trade deal with the EU, like what way that leaves the two islands that are stuck between Atlanticist policies there, like what you had before with Airbus and Boeing trade tariff war under Trump. There's now a move to kind of resolve that. And just lastly, a point just on the corporation tax, like over the last 10 or odd years, a big part of the economic policy of the Northern Ireland state was about tax bearing in pairs. But there's a wider move now for corporation tax to be moved up, like onto a global scale almost, which kind of again goes back to the EU-US sort of trade policies, sort of overlines anything that the Irish model of lower corporation tax for the multinationals is that economic model slowly being whittled away, and an effort to reshore a lot of that to the US in terms of Google and Apple and all the rest of them. So just a wee point on that.
All right. So, Maxim, you've indicated as well.
Yes, red salute from the Revolutionary Workers' Party to you, comrades. Now, I find it telling that capitalism is finally on its deathbed by the fact that apparently the troops in the United Kingdom, the soldiers, now have the authority to shoot anyone they don't like. Because in Russia, in last year, the similar legislation was passed, but not about our heroic troops, but about the police. They can now not show their police identification when they arrest you. They can pretty much break into any car, and they also can shoot they don't like. But another thing is that in Russia, we, the left, the local left, are currently facing the seeds of the resurgent workers' movement towards their own power. And this year, we are having elections to Gosduma, which is our parliament. And the Communist Party of Russian Federation, the KPRF, will attract a lot of the working masses to their side and will most likely win the elections, which will politicize a lot of the workers, and then we can start working, acting from this point, including our revolution, including my party, the Revolutionary Workers' Party, to whom I'm a candidate member. Now the question is, one of the members of Central Committee of Revolutionary Workers' Party said that the economical collapse of Russia, which has been frankly horrifying, is nothing compared to what is happening in Britain. And therefore, much like in the 19th century, the Marx and Engels were looking towards the working class of the Great Britain as very revolutionary and active, we also look at your proletarians with hope. The question is the Central Committee of our party justified in their belief that the working class in the United Kingdom will get revolutionary in the nearest future? Will there be any sort of event that will escalate this process?
Okay. So just one last call for someone, anyone, one last go to come in. Anyone who wants to ask a question or make a point? No.